Hello, Tanya here with a tutorial request from one of our MySlope designers, Mia. So in preparation for the dance competition season, we're going to be working together to create a fun dance costume. Step number one, we're going to head over to myslope.com and head into the drafting library. And we're going to pick the halter open back top. And we are going to set the strap width to 0. And then for the arm and neck hole seam allowance, we're going to set that to a negative number because we're going to do a little bit of color blocking in order to do some binding that can be achieved with a regular sewing machine and give a really polished look without a binder. So how I'm going to get this number is I'm going to take my elastic and multiply it by 2 and then add a little bit of ease. So 0.67 times 2 plus around 0.2 and I got negative 1.5. Okay, so download or print your pattern. I'm going to be opening it in Adobe Illustrator. First thing we're going to do is we're going to trace off that binding piece. So what happened here when we added that negative seam allowance is the line went down negative 1.5 centimeters instead of up negative 1.5 centimeters. So it's essentially negative seam allowance and it cut into our pattern. So we're going to trace that off because that is the color block section. That is what we're going to be using as our binding. And then we are going to trace the front part off and put that to the side. And if you're working with paper, you can trace this on paper. And then we're going to trace off the back piece. And then we're going to put that to the side. And then we're going to attach them together. After we attach them together, we're just going to mirror paste them. And this, I'm doing this so I have less seams, honestly. So I just have that back seam. And then after that, we're going to add our seam allowance. So my seam allowance is 0.67 centimeters. I'm just going to trace off the whole thing because I'm using Adobe Illustrator. If you're on paper, you're just going to trace the seam allowance around and make your new piece. So I'm just going to trace this off and then add seam allowance. So after we added our seam allowance, we're going to be cutting 2 of those pieces. And now we have to work on our pattern. So we're going to trace off the entire pattern. And because we set the seam allowance to 0, we're going to have to add in seam allowance after the fact. So if you're using Adobe Illustrator or any vector editing software, you can easily add the seam allowance when you offset the path. If you're on paper, you're just going to trace it off to the side. Important to note, you want to trace from that bottom line because we did our color blocking, right? So the color blocking is going to sit on top. So we're tracing from the bottom line. I'm putting it off to the side and we're going to be adding seam allowance on that armhole, that the bust line, and then the side seam. And because we're going to be cutting on the fold, or if you want to mirror paste your pieces, you're not going to put seam allowance on that center front. Ignore my puppy crying in the background. And I'm going to measure the center point of the side seam for my straps. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to my back panel and I'm tracing off the center piece on the center point on my back panel. And then I'm going to measure from this center back to that side seam center point to get the length of my center strap. And then I'm going to go from the underbust to the center back to get my underbust strap. Now I'm going to put the lengths down below and we're going to do some math here to work out how long and wide the straps are going to be. So the straps do stretch a bit. When you narrow your fabric, you're going to get more stretch. So I like to reduce my straps a little bit more to even have a bit more tension to make the garment a bit more secure. So I'm going to reduce by 8%. So I'm going to take the length of my strap from what I measured it, and then I'm going to reduce it by 0.9, and then that's where the length comes in. And then for the width, I'm going to use my formula here, which is elastic width times 2 plus seam allowance times 2. So that's going to give me my final length and width for my straps. Now we're going to do the armhole straps. So first I want to see where I'm going to start my strap. So I'm taking my back neck length at 20.78, and we're going to divide it by 4 because I wanted to start 1/4 of the way on my back. So that's 5 centimeters. So I'm just going to put a little line 5 centimeters from center back, and then I'm going to draw in a quick Bezier curve to approximate where the strap, how long the strap's going to be. So I put that to the arm side point, and then I reduce by 0.9, and then I'm going to get my final result for the arm strap, which is 17.55, and we're going to apply the same formula as above. So our elastic width times 2 plus our seam allowance times 2. However, I do showcase how to do flounces with our binding method, and if you're going to do that, we need to use this formula here. So elastic width times 2 plus seam allowance times 2 plus some ease. And if you're using 2 different elastic widths, so you're going to do the first elastic width plus the second elastic width. So if you wanted in the side seam, you're doing 0.67 elastic and then 1.2, that's what it's going to be. Okay, so now we're going to cut out our elastic. So this is my 1.2 elastic strap. So that's going to be the center strap and the underbust strap. And then these are my armhole straps. I'm going to be going with 0.67 centimeter elastic. So that's just 0.67 centimeters times 2 plus my seam allowance times 2. And yeah, then we have our front and back panel. We are first going to sew, we're going to do some concealed seams here. So we're going to sew the armhole seam and the underbust seam first. I'm pointing at all my elastics. We're going to sew those two, but armhole seam and underbust seam. And we're going to use elastic. So here I am attaching the elastic and sewing those seams. And then I'm sewing my elastic here, my straps. So we're folding the strap in half. And then the folded part is going to be facing the machine, and that's going to be where the elastic is going to attach. So you see armholes sewn, underbust sewn, and then we have our elastics. And by that I mean straps. So we're just going to turn those straps right side out using our loop turner. Okay, now that we have our straps ready to go, we're going to attach our straps. So that armhole strap, the thinner one, I'm going to be attaching it right under the armpit, essentially, the arm side. And then that's just going to be concealed in there too. So the armhole straps are going in that top corner. And then we're going to attach our back straps, which I'm having issue with my pins here. So center strap, and I marked the center point on the side seam on my pattern. So we're going to thread that through. We're going to pin it. And then because the strap is significantly more narrow than our pattern, we're going to have to just pull our fabric through. And then we're going to attach our waist, our underbust strap in that bottom corner. So really try to wedge it in there so you have the cleanest finish. So we're going to thread that through. Also, make sure that nothing is twisting when you're threading it through. So really tippity tap with your fingers to ensure everything is correct and flat. So I'm just going to pin that, and then we're good to go. Then we're just going to sew those side seams. So right to the serger, sew those side seams down, and that's going to attach all our straps, and they're going to be nice and concealed inside. Very easy. So you can see all 3 straps are nice and sandwiched in there. Okay, so we see that everything is enclosed except for that neck piece. So we're just gonna pull everything right side out now and lay everything flat. And then we're gonna work on the neck binding. This is gonna be the star of the show. So I'm gonna turn everything right side out. The only thing not attached is those armhole straps, and that's what we're gonna attach with our neck binding. So we're gonna attach that at the same time as the neck binding. So here are neck binding pieces. We remember that from the drafting tutorial part at the beginning, and we're essentially going to sandwich the bottom part of the U shape, the bottom seam, to that front seam. Remember, we color blocked it, and we're gonna sandwich it. So this is gonna take some finessing. So yeah, and then you can see how it's sandwiched down. I need to reiterate here, it's that bottom seam, the U part at the bottom, that we're attaching to our garment to do that first sandwich. And then we're gonna sew our elastic along that first seam. And then we're going to mark 5 centimeters in from that center back point, and we're going to sew our armhole straps in with that binding. So here I am with the attaching my elastic and then making sure that, you know, I get my armhole strap in there. And you can see that the elastic is sandwiched in. So it's sandwiched in between the main pattern. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna fold up those 2 pieces. We're gonna fold them up. And then we're essentially gonna attach elastic at the top and fold it over and do a fold over elastic method. But before we do that, we need to close the loop. So we're gonna need to sew that center back seam or sew across. You could use a straight stitch. I use my serger. I think this seam is stronger, but also I'm lazy. And I don't like my straight stitch machine. Okay, so that loop is finally closed. I do go over it a double time. Now we're gonna fold up those 2 pieces that we sandwiched, and see, it is the bottom seam that we attached. And we're going to attach our elastic on the top. So remember when you're sewing your elastic to do it on the wrong side, because you're gonna fold it over. So we see our elastic, the front looks nice and clean. That elastic's on the back. We're gonna fold that over. We're gonna fold it over all the way around, and then we're just gonna top stitch that down. So you could use your straight stitch machine, you can use your cover stitch machine. I'm obsessed with my industrial cover stitch, so we are gonna use that. And you can see how I'm folding it under, and then I'm feeding it under my presser foot. So I'm making sure that the edge is really lined up with the edge of the presser foot, so we're catching those seams. So here's me trying to hand hold my phone to show you. So we're folding over that elastic all the way through, all the way around. And there she goes. So. No skip stitches because it's industrial. Okay, so we see the finish on this, so nice and clean. But like I said, you could use a zigzag stitch on your normal sewing machine. And yeah, it is nice, clean. Everything is tucked away, so you're not finicking and folding over and then like trying to hand bind, or if you're using a binder, and binders are finicky if you don't have a specific type of cover stitch machine. Or you might get skip stitches, because I had a domestic cover stitch machine and it was a nightmare. Okay, this is the final look. See how it's super strappy, so dancy. I am absolutely obsessed with this method. I will show you how to add flounces to those armhole straps. Yes, I'm jiggying, and you can see that it's solid for the stage. Okay, let's do some flounces now. So a little bonus part. I'm setting my differential feed to 2.0, so we're getting those gathers, and then we're gonna use the same method. So we're taking our straps there, and we're gonna sandwich them between the flounce, and then we're gonna sew without elastic because the elastic is already in the flounce part. So we're just gonna cover stitch that down. So I'm pinning it. You see that it's sandwiched. And then off to the overlocker we go. I'm setting my differential feed back to 1. And then we're going to sew that down. And then we're going to do the same thing we did for the neck binding. We're going to fold up our pieces. Ignore my puppy crying in the background. And then we're going to attach our elastic at the top, and we're going to do the fold over elastic method. So we're attaching the elastic at the top. We fold it up our pieces, and then we're going to attach our elastic. And now I'm going to show you that it is possible with a zigzag stitch. This machine is so dusty. I use my cover stitch machine, but it is possible. So I zigzag stitch that elastic down, and to be honest, it actually the finish looks a lot cleaner. Less threads, I guess, but yeah. Then you would just essentially attach this strap like we did at the beginning instead of like the plain strap where you just throw this in. Yep, that's it. All right, thanks. And you can try this top design yourself or a different variation of that using the open back halter top pattern. And if you love the My Slope tools, show us what you make. Like and subscribe.